Welcome to the Prospective Doctor podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Pre-med and medical students alike are encouraged to tune in each week for tips on how to become a strong med school candidate, gain acceptance into the school of your dreams, and succeed on your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
Hello, everyone. We have a very special guest today, Dr. Natasha Bray. I'm just going to give her an opportunity to tell us a little bit about herself and her journey through medicine.
Good morning. As she said, my name is Dr. Natasha Bray. I'm board certified in internal medicine and addiction. I grew up in Enid, Oklahoma, which is a small rural town in northwest Oklahoma. My dad was actually a primary care doc there, so I had the good fortune to kind of grow up in a medical household, which I know is a little bit different from a lot of you in the background and experiences that you are coming to this journey with. I did my undergraduate education at the University of Tulsa and went to medical school at Oklahoma State University College of Osteopathic Medicine in Tulsa. From there, what then was called a traditional rotating internship, which is something that was done in the osteopathic profession and actually doesn't exist anymore, but it gives you the opportunity to rotate really through all of the different specialties of medicine and gives you a little bit of an extra time to decide what the right fit is for you from a career standpoint. After finishing that in Philadelphia, I headed to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I did my internal medicine residency at Cambridge Health Alliance and spent 3 years there doing internal medicine before finishing and trying to figure out what I wanted to do professionally. I truthfully thought I would do a fellowship. And because of my husband and where he was with his career, we made the decision that we were going to move to Miami, Florida. And so I took a teaching position at Nova Southeastern University College of Osteopathic Medicine with the thought of, well, I'll do this for a year or two, and then I'll apply for fellowships and go back and do a fellowship, and ended up falling in love with medical education and really that kind of hybrid practice of being able to work with medical students and teach, but still spend a good percentage of my time working as a hospitalist and working with really underserved communities. And that kind of ended up shaping the subsequent and rest of my career to this point in time.
That's awesome. And I just always find it so fascinating and heartwarming when I speak to new people on the show and you find those little points of connection. I actually did kind of a combined medical school program, and one of my first shadowing experiences actually was at the Cambridge Health Alliance with an internal medicine doctor, and it was very wonderful and kind of drove me into choosing primary care. So that's just awesome. You mentioned that you're in internal medicine and addiction medicine, and you kind of showed some of the reasons why you have a passion for medical education and how you headed into primary care. What inspired you to pursue an addiction medicine specialty?
I think when you look and you begin to work in the primary care field, you begin to see a lot of the challenges that face different populations. And it's pretty rare to find a patient that isn't affected by their socioeconomic status, by the environment in which they live, by underlying health and mental health challenges. And so as we begin to work with patients and we look for ways to support them in their journey towards health, addiction kept coming up over and over. And, addiction impacts not only the patient, but their family, their ability to earn a living, how they interact with other members of their religious community, their home community, in such a really staggering way. At the time that I went into practice in South Florida, the opioid epidemic and opioid prescribing was a major problem we talked about at that time. So we're around 2006 to 2010. Narco tourism people would come to South Florida to get their opioids, and then they were really being sold and distributed across the United States. So as we worked with these patients and we saw really just a tragic impact on them, the question began, I didn't have the knowledge that I needed to help them because it was so complex. And there's the medical component, there's the psychological, mental health component, but there's also so many social impacts associated with that and how we help support them in a way of achieving health and engaging with a healthcare system, that it was important to me to develop that skill set so that I was better positioned to serve my patients, but also to support the medical students, because medical education is hard. And I think that that's important to state. So, and to cage what I'm getting ready to see, but I was seeing medical students in their third and fourth year. And also as they went into their residencies, they would talk about patients being non-compliant and using language that really was not respectful to the experience that patients were having. So me developing my skill set so that I could share that with my learners to really help them better care for the populations that we were caring for was important.
I love that, because that is such an important topic. And as everyone has been listening throughout, at least very highlighted this past year about all of the social determinants of health and everything, we all know that certain parts of your life can impact your health. And with that, when I was in training, I trained in Boston and I trained in Baltimore. So there was also a lot of addiction in the area. And one of my mentors mentioned to me, and it just changed the way that I thought about it. Like, addiction is a medical condition, just like diabetes is or hypertension is. And just the way no one grows up and says, hey, when I'm 30, I want to have high blood pressure. No one grows up and says, hey, when I'm 30, I want to be addicted to heroin or cocaine. And the same way you can treat them with medications and interventions and therapy and help people reform their lives and get better and extend their life expectancy, you can do the same for addiction. And you can see the transformation that can happen when one doctor kind of dedicates and treats you like a human being. So I think that that's wonderful that you got that extra training in order to help train the next generation of doctors. Now, speaking on training the next generation of doctors, you're the Interim Dean to the Cherokee Nation campus of Oklahoma State University Center for Health Sciences, which is like a long sentence for me to say. It's the nation's first college of medicine affiliated with a tribe and located on tribal land. Why is that such an important development?
So this brought me home to Oklahoma. And I think that that's kind of important to say. You know, I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think it's important in our life to work with a mission in mind. And I would encourage all of the pre-meds and medical students who listen to this, really think about what is your mission and why are you pursuing this and why do you want to do that? Because that helps us keep grounded in what we do. So OSU Cherokee Nation campus really opened in August of 2020. And as you mentioned, it's the first medical school that's actually on a tribal reservation and in partnership with one of our federally recognized tribes. If we look at our physician workforce, less than 0.2% of physicians who are practicing in the United States are American Indian or Alaskan Native. And that's compared to approximately 1.3% of the population. So if you think about that as a magnitude of disparity of representation of American Indian or Alaskan Native physicians compared to the population, that's around a 4.3% disparity. So very much underrepresented in medicine. And that's true in the medical school population, in the GME, graduate medical education population, but also in our physician workforce. Then you combine that with some of the challenges we have in the state of Oklahoma related to healthcare disparities. We have a low population of primary care physicians, much lower than what you see in other parts of the nation. It's estimated by 2025 that we'll have 830 physicians need for primary care that we don't have. So openings. So that's a projected gap of almost 27% compared to what we need. And that was before, that data all comes from before COVID. So we know how stressful COVID has been on our physician workforce and the impact that it's had on retirements and people stepping away from the profession. So that's probably even higher now if we looked at that data. And specifically within our rural populations in Oklahoma, approximately 36% of primary care physicians that are practicing in Oklahoma are either in Tulsa or Oklahoma City, so more of our metroplex. So the lack of access to care for our rural communities and our tribal citizens that are living within those rural communities is pretty dramatic. So what does that mean? That means patients have longer wait times to get to a doctor. They have longer distances to travel to get there, which has both a time as well as a financial impact. They have to miss a whole day of work instead of a few hours. They have to pay for gas and have access to travel, which when we talk about rural communities, that can be a real issue. And both of those things result in delayed care that results in pretty marked health disparities. So the Cherokee Nation, really going back to the mid-2000s, thought about how can they approach this problem. And one of the things they did was develop community healthcare centers across the 14 county reservations. So all citizens who live within the reservation are within 35 miles of a primary care center. Wonderful, but they still didn't have physicians to staff it. So that began OSU's journey in partnership with the Cherokee Nation is how can we work together to inspire people to want to be primary care doctors and want to work in these rural communities and begin to build lives and opportunities that change the trajectory of where people are. And that's really what this project's been about. If you look at where we are, as I said, we have our second class that started in August. We are very, very proud of the students that we've recruited. Our main campus in Tulsa has a class size of 115. We have 50 students here. So it's a very small environment where people really have the opportunity to get to know each other. But the demographics on our class, if we look at them, so I'll tell you this year's class, so class that matriculated in 2025, 24.5% of those students are Native Americans, which is really just an amazing opportunity. And they don't only come from the Cherokee Nation. We have representation from the Chickasaw Nation, Muskogee Creek Nation, Choctaw Nation, Caddo, Peoria tribe. So we're seeing a lot of recruitment for Native American tribes from across the country. The other thing that we work really hard on is we don't want to just recruit and help with the disparities related to Native Americans and healthcare. We also want to look at our other represented minorities. So the class is, as a whole is 34% underrepresented minorities in medicine. So that adds in our Black African American as well as our Hispanic and Latinx population. So working very, very hard to bring people into an environment where maybe they're a little bit more comfortable because we are a smaller environment. We have a little bit more face-to-face support to create an environment that allows them to be successful in their journey through their medical education.
That's amazing. And I can just imagine over time the amount of impact that it will have on not only Oklahoma, but the nation, because you have so many people there with a mission-driven school. They're learning and in the trenches, and you learn so much, especially in a rural environment. You get the full spectrum of medicine, and then being able to contribute to the community is amazing. So I know that we'll be hearing great things about all of the students after they graduate.
We hope so. We have faith, and really one of the most powerful things is we're so proud of our students that are here, but it's really their impact on their communities that really is inspiring. Because if you think about a student who is a first generation to graduate high school, who's a first generation to graduate college, and then is successfully moving through the medical school environment, how our students go back and talk to students in their communities, those K-12 populations, they begin to inspire opportunities. And if those students don't become physicians, but they become nurses, or they become aeronautical engineers or paleontologists, it begins to change that educational trajectory that acts as such a huge barrier to success. When you see someone who looks like you, who's had a shared experience, it's so much more meaningful than anything that I could ever do to begin to inspire them to dream big and to pursue those dreams.
I couldn't agree more. If you see it, that means that you too can achieve it. So you are also the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. What features do you think makes a great medical school candidate?
I love this question because I don't think there's any right answer. And I think everyone you talk to is going to give you a different perspective, and understanding that is really important. Everyone who comes to medicine brings themselves, and you need to be able to do that because that's the unique gifts that you have that will make a difference for patients. So there are things that you have to do, and that's just part of the process. And those are really to prepare you to be successful within the curriculum. So we absolutely look at the experiences that students have. We want to know that they were able to successfully move through the required prerequisites and that they were successful in doing that. We look at MCAT performance. So that is another, and there's lots of debate of, is the MCAT a good predictor of success? What I will tell you in my opinion, and this is only my opinion, the reason why it's used and relied on so much is your ability to take a test predicts your ability to take a test. And medical school is filled with tests. So we want people who can approach that and are going to be able to be successful in that process. The worst thing we could possibly do is take someone into medical school and allow them to take on financial burden that they're not going to be able to meet because they're not going to successfully graduate. So we want to make sure that we're recruiting people that we know can move through the curriculum, they can pass their licensing exams, and that they can move on to a successful career. We don't want to take someone who can't meet those benchmarks. So we look at that. I think, though, there's lots of people who can check that box. So the question becomes then, what makes you unique and how you tell your story? And so I said earlier, having a good sense of what your mission is, and that mission is going to change over time, and that's okay. And it should. You should probably we laugh about New Year's resolutions, and maybe it's not New Year's, maybe it's your birthday, but reevaluate. What is my mission? Is that still the right mission for me? Or do I need to modify it? Companies do it. So why would we not modify that personal mission that we're striving for as we grow and develop and our life changes? But understand what motivates you, and then look for schools that match that mission. We are very specific mission oriented. We want to train primary care providers to meet the needs of rural communities and other underserved communities. That may not meet your mission. Your mission may be that you want a PhD and to be in the lab and develop the perfect vaccine that never needs to be boosted for COVID. You're probably not going to be successful in our environment. So finding a school that meets that mission, that aligns to where your values are, is critically important. And you, as a student who's approaching this, deserve that. Don't fall into this trap of feeling like anything will do. Be aggressive in pursuing your dreams. And if you do that, people are going to be attracted to you. People like to see that type of confidence in where you are. And then be willing to change your mind. It's okay. You may have not been exposed to something or had a life experience that fundamentally shifts something in your core that refocuses your mission in a different direction. And that's okay.
I couldn't word it any differently or any better. So I'll just leave that there. Just find your why and figure out how to connect your story and tell it, and stay true to yourself and find a place that aligns with who you are. So, as you mentioned, some people might be trying to find the best COVID vaccine cure. So we all know that the pandemic has changed a lot, including the interviewing process for medical school. How can one best prepare for virtual interviewing?
So first, I want to say I don't envy anyone who's in this position. I think it's really a new skill that we're all learning to develop. It's been a learning curve for all of us. We've had the opportunity to do this for about a year and a half now. So I would say first practice. Get on, Zoom. You can do 20-minute calls for free. Don't forget to take advantage of those things and really practice. Get used to talking to a camera. The number one mistake that I've seen to this point is people not being aware of their surroundings. We've seen everything from an unmade bed in the background to, people walking by, roommates walking by in the background, people forgetting that their camera's on and doing really interesting and bizarre things. So really practice that skill, turn your camera on, look at what's in your background, be cognizant of your appearance. Does the colors match right? Is the lighting good? And those things sound really kind of silly, but they're really important. The next thing that I would tell you is do things to minimize your stress so that you're able to really connect with whoever's interviewing you. So if you're in an environment where you have unstable internet connection, think about what alternatives you have to address that. Where could you get Wi-Fi that's more reliable in a public setting? And then go there again and test and see what the noise things are, all kinds of things along those environments. Because the more you create an environment that you're comfortable in, that you don't have to worry about the internet cutting out or it freezing up, the more you are going to allow your strengths to shine through. And I think that that's really what this is about, is connecting with people in a way that's meaningful. The other thing that I would encourage, and all the platforms are different, so it's a little bit hard for me to give you 100%, in Zoom as well as in WebEx, in the Microsoft product, I think it's Microsoft Teams, you can hide your own camera view. So once you know your background is good, I would encourage you to hide your camera view. And the reason that I say that is you want to connect with the person you're looking at. You don't want to be worrying about your facial expressions and how silly or different or awkward you feel that you look, because that's going to impact your confidence and your ability to relate to the person that you're interviewing with. And then be yourself. Let your strengths and your story and your passion shine through. And I know that's easy for me to say, but this is a stressful environment, but you'll be prepared and do those things to prepare yourself, and then just enjoy the experience. Be present in the moment and don't be afraid of the process. The process is how we grow. You will have a bad interview at some point, I promise. And really be critical of yourself, be reflective on yourself, and then forgive yourself and look at it as to what can I take away from this experience that I can do better or differently in the future to position me to achieve my goals and my dreams.
Those were such great pieces of advice. I hope that all of the students listening are taking notes or sharing with your friends who may not have heard this so that they can prepare for their wonderful interviews that they're going to crush this interview season. My final question for you is, what is the best piece of advice that you have received?
I have been blessed with so many mentors over the years that I'm not sure how to answer this, but I think I would go with the concept of grace. And what I mean by that is the ability to forgive yourself and recognize that we are all a work in progress. And by nothing we do or have done, do we get a lot of the opportunities that we have. And by nothing that we did or have done, do we lose opportunities. So that same grace that we give to other people to allow them to be perfectly flawed, complete humans, I think we have to turn that inward. This journey, as I said, is very hard, and we tend to focus on constant, continuous improvement, and that is wonderful. But recognizing that in ourselves, perfection is always just out of reach, and allowing yourself the grace to be a complete person who is going to have a bad day, who may say something wrong, who may not do well on a test, who may not do perfect on an interview, and you are still an amazing person who deserves every blessing that comes your way in life, is really so critically important. It's so important for your well-being and for your ability to remember that we're here because we want to make the world a better place for others. And if you're not willing to grant that grace to yourself, it's very hard to continue through this profession for a long time.
That's amazing advice. I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell our audience goodbye. I'm so thankful that you were able to stop by and give us so many great pieces of wisdom. And you can also mention if the students have any questions, how they can reach out to you.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for allowing me the time to talk with you. I wish you nothing but success as you pursue your careers. Please stay true to yourself. Recognize that everyone's journey is going to look differently. And that's what makes this such an amazing experience and makes us as healthcare providers so equipped to deal with all the challenges that the people that we dedicate our lives to serve are facing. You can follow me on Twitter. It's at DRBRAY is probably the easiest way to keep track of me. If you have questions and you want to reach out to me, you can email me. It's Natasha. It's NATASHA .Bray, BRAY, at okstate.edu. I wish you nothing but happiness and success in your journey.
Thank you so much. And for all of the listeners out there, please click that subscribe. Definitely take the advice and kind of meditate on it and figure out what you can do as the interview season approaches, and stay true to yourself. I'll see you guys next week with another guest. Have a great day. Bye.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward med school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.